What is up, stats nerds? I am Professor Charlie Collins. Welcome to another feature of Current Mode, where we aren't mean, we are just average. Today, we're talking about construct measurement. Specifically, I will talk about measurement, psychometrics, and operationalization. Let's talk about what measurement is. Measurement is the process of quantifying different attributes about a subject being studied. So we may study the cognitive abilities, personality traits, or behaviors of individual people, for example, or if we're studying something like neighborhoods, we may quantify characteristics such as crime, policing, rental prices, and so on. Generally, self-reports and direct observations are the two types of assessments used for measurement. Self-reports are things like surveys, questionnaires, interviews, something the participant fills out themselves, right? Or does themselves. Direct observations include the researcher taking a measure of some observed phenomenon, right? So it could be something like counting how many cars drive through a stop sign, assessing participants' skills using some type of test, like a cognitive puzzle or something like that, or like a physical skills test. In the social sciences, some of the constructs we measure are fairly objective and easily measurable, right? So something like somebody's heart rate, GPA, or age, for example. However, many of the things that we measure can be subjective, abstract, and really difficult to measure. So for example, how would I go about measuring something like implicit bias or self-efficacy or extroversion? Fortunately, psychologists develop a field dedicated to this issue called psychometrics, which is the study and creation of ways to measure people's behavioral and mental characteristics. Psychometrics are now used across the social sciences as a framework to measure a wide variety of constructs at different ecological levels. Now let's jump into how to create measures. The first part of creating a measure is to identify whether your construct is unidimensional or multidimensional. A unidimensional construct is one that can be assessed with a single measure. A multidimensional construct is one that has multiple dimensions and thus needs to be measured in different ways to get at each of those dimensions. For example, GPA is unidimensional, whereas something like intelligence is multidimensional because it takes into consideration more than just grade point average. Operationalization is the process of defining a variable in terms of specific measurable operations or procedures. The goal of operationalization is to ensure a variable can be reliably and validly measured. There are 4 basic steps in operationalizing a construct and turning it into a statistical variable. First, we must clearly define the construct that the variable represents. For example, a variable measuring happiness might be defined as one's subjective experience of positive emotions. Second, we need to identify specific components of the construct to be measured. For example, happiness could include factors such as positive affect, life satisfaction, or overall well-being. Third, we have to develop an instrument, such as a survey or a test, that can be used to measure the variable. An instrument should be designed to measure each of the factors identified in the previous step. And last but not least, we have to test the instrument by administering it to a sample of participants. As part of this process, it's important to test for reliability, which is the consistency of a measure, and validity, which is the extent to which an instrument is measuring what it's supposed to. Now, when operationalizing multidimensional constructs, there are 3 methods to measure and classify those different dimensions. First, we have psychometric scales, and those are the most frequently used in the social sciences, and particularly among psychology and political science. Scaling combines several measures of individual factors that make up a construct of interest. For example, if quote-unquote happiness is comprised of 3 factors of positive affect, life satisfaction, and overall well-being, then psychological scaling would provide a single score of happiness based on multiple scores from each of those factors. Indexes are composite measures that combine several individual measures into a single score, but instead of underlying factors, indexes provide a summary measure of different aspects of a particular construct or phenomenon. So, for example, an index of economic well being might combine measures of income, employment, and education to provide a single score that reflects an individual's overall economic well being. Finally, typologies are a classification system that groups individuals or objects into categories based on certain attributes. The goal of a typology is to identify patterns in the data. So imagine, for example, a graph with an x-axis and a y-axis, right? And so on the left side of the x-axis is economic liberalism, and on the right side is economic conservatism. Then on the top of the y-axis is social liberalism, and the bottom is social conservatism. You could then categorize people on those two dimensions based on, let's say, responses from a survey. And this could be a typology of political ideologies, right? So you would have the four different quadrants and you could cluster people based on their responses. To sum up, measurement is the process of quantifying different attributes about a subject being studied, and operationalization is the process of defining a variable in terms of specific measurable operations or procedures. And to give you something to ponder on while at home, think about something in your life that is difficult to measure. It could be something like workplace satisfaction, independence, or tiredness. But something specific to your life, make it specific to you. And then go through the process of defining that idea, identifying its attributes, and then think about how you would assess it, right? Once you can do that, once you start going through that process fairly easily, and fairly quickly, then you're one step closer to being a social scientist. Thanks for watching Current Mode. I will catch you next time.